Okay, we're going to talk about diffusion and osmosis. And what I've done here is I've come to the eChalk website, which, as I keep saying, is great. Remember, username Rygate, password master. And I want to just go through the diffusion and osmosis, and actually we can move on to active transport as well here. So starting off with diffusion, now it's really common for diffusion to be asked as a definition question for a couple of marks. And diffusion is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to low concentration down a concentration gradient. Not across a concentration gradient. You go down a concentration gradient. And it's just a bit like going downhill. Okay? And so diffusion goes from an area of high concentration to low concentration. And so if we click on the diffusion, we can see here, and we start the simulation. It's really quite straightforward. The key I want you to remember here is that this is random. There is no intention of these purple balls to spread out because they're thinking, oh, fellas, it's all a bit cramped in here. We better get over there. We better mingle. It's not like being at a party where you're sitting nervously with your Diet Coke in the corner thinking I should socialise. Guys, this is just about random movements. Look at those particles. They've all got kinetic energy. They're all bumping into each other. And that bumping into each other just knocks them randomly. And if you were to make that whole situation random, there would be a general spreading out of those particles. And that's what diffusion is. It's the random spreading out of particles from an area of high concentration to low concentration. Okay? And it's so random that after a while, if I pause it there, it even looks like there's more on this side than there on the other side. But that's not intentional. If we let it run and we stop it now, they're much more spread out. And you can see the same for the little ones. So with diffusion, if somebody was going back to if this was somebody spraying a bit of perfume into a room, the perfume would start off right where it came from the bottle, and then slowly the perfume particles would just spread out, and they'd be going down their concentration gradient. Okay? Now, the way that these particles move is just like enzymes and substrates. They're just moving around. And if we gave those more kinetic energy, they would move around faster, and diffusion would happen faster. And so this is a really good analogy, which means a good example of the way that enzymes and substrates might work, or anything, in fact, involving temperature. So, in terms of diffusion, simple 2-mark question. The movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Okay? So, if we come out of that, and now we go into osmosis. Now, osmosis is going to be a 3-mark question, because there is 3 specific areas you've got to mention. Okay? There's an overlap with diffusion, but osmosis is slightly different. Okay? And in osmosis, we are talking about, and these are the 3 points you've got to remember, I'm going to make this really slow. It is the net movement of water from an area of high water potential to an area of low water potential to a semi-permeable membrane. Okay? So, they're only going to give you probably 3 marks, but it could be 4. So let's go through the 4 points I've mentioned. 1, the net flow. I'm going to come to that in a minute. 2, of water. Osmosis doesn't occur when perfume's moving. Osmosis doesn't occur when sucrose or sugar's moving. Osmosis is water. It's a special type of diffusion for water. The 3rd is the semi-permeable membrane. That is a membrane which is, or it could be selectively permeable, whichever you prefer. And selectively permeable means it only allows small ions or water to go through. Okay, big clunky things are not going to go through. Okay, cross-referencing, that's why we have proteins which either actively transport or offer facilitated diffusion. And the last thing is that they go from an area of high water potential to low water potential. Now, that actually just means high water concentration to low water concentration. But the much better terminology is high water potential, And the potential is, how much potential does it have to give water? So if we've got this frozen here, this is the beginning point. The blue are water. If you look at this side, look how many waters this can donate compared to this. There's loads here. And so water is going to go from here to there. But remember, there's no intention here, guys. This is just all of the water randomly hitting and colliding. And if you do this, it's going to result in it looking like they're deliberately going over the other side. But they're not. They're just randomly going to move, and eventually everything's going to equalize. Okay? So if we start this, you'll see this is quite slow. Some are going through, but some hit the so that one's gone through, but they're hitting the semi-permeable membrane as well, so it's not as if they're all trying to get through the holes. And over time, and we can see here that this is currently 24/16, and this is just slowly going to equalize. Okay? This is the random movement. Now at the moment, there is a net flow of water molecules from the more water molecules over here to over here. Okay? Overall, there are still water molecules. But when I say net flow, look at this one. Look at, oh, okay, no. I'm looking for one that goes through. Look at him. He's just gone through from here. But there's more water molecules over here. So remember, there is movement this way. But the net flow, which means the overall flow, is this way. When we get, which we're about to in a second, if I speed this up, make it happen quicker, okay, it's going to get there quicker. We've now got 18, 22, 21, 20, 20. Now, overall, we've pretty much got no net flow. It's equal. So osmosis is still, look, water is still moving through a semi-permeable membrane, but there's no net flow. So when you get asked a question about the isotonic point, or the point at which there's no mass change or there's no change in concentration, it's not that water molecules aren't still moving. They are, remember, they're randomly moving around because they've got kinetic energy. It's just that there's no net flow. They are now equal. But one last thing to mention about this video. Look at the sucrose, the big clunky yellows. They are not going anywhere. They are moving around on their side because they can't get through the semi-permeable membrane. We started off with 1 on the left and 5 on the outside, and they cannot get through, so that just hasn't changed. And even if we make it really, really fast, they are still going to stay there. Even if they've got as much energy as you want, they're going to stay on the other side. And you can see here, that's roughly fluctuating between 18, 22, 20, 20. Okay? And that's what's happening the whole time. So osmosis, just go through those 4 points, is the net flow of water through a selectively permeable membrane or semi-permeable membrane from an area of high water potential to low water potential. Or if you like, high water concentration to low water concentration. Just like I talked about enzymes and diffusion, the faster you do it, the quicker diffusion happens. Okay? The other thing that can affect osmosis and diffusion, of course, is the surface area. If we had a much, much bigger semi-permeable membrane here, if this was 100 times the size of the screen, think about how many water molecules could move through that semi-permeable membrane. So surface area and temperature are going to have a big impact upon the rate of osmosis. So last of all, active transport. Now active transport is when we use energy to take molecules against a concentration gradient. Okay? So you would have a high concentration and a low concentration. If it was diffusion, normally the particles would go from an area of high to low. But active transport is where they can't get through the membrane. They're separated because they don't pass through. And therefore, like the sugar here in this example, just like the sugar we looked at with water, it can't get through. But the cell specifically wants to get them through. So what it has to do is it can't rely on anything what we call passive. Passive is when something happens to you. Okay, remember, passive smoking is when you just breathe in other people's smoke. You're not deliberately doing it, it's just happening. And diffusion is a passive process. Osmosis is a passive process. But in order to get things up against the concentration gradient from an area of low concentration to high concentration, we need to put in energy. And this is how this works. And it's really simple. What happens is the sucrose comes in randomly, hits, energy is expended, and the protein takes it through. Remember, it's random insofar as they've got kinetic energy and they'll hit the right protein, just like an active site and substrate hitting. And when they hit that right protein, energy will be expended and they'll get through. And you can see here, slowly, we are building up a concentration on the right-hand side, which is against the rules, if you like. Okay? If this was permeable to the sucrose would be going through and we'd end up with equal numbers on each side. But it's not. And so, there we go. And now we've just got one left. I'm going to give it, is it going to bounce perfectly for this one? Is it going to go perfectly in? Oh, you've got to be happy. Brilliant. So there we have a completely against the rules process. And in order to do it, you needed energy. And you know what, guys? That's no different than the analogy of a hill. When you've got diffusion and osmosis, it's a passive process. It just happens. As it happens when you're at the top of a hill on a bike and you freewheel down. If you want to get that bike back up to the top, you're going against gravity, you're going against what will happen naturally. You've got to put in energy. And that's why you get really sweaty and start breathing really heavily. So that is diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. And with active transport, when you're thinking about the points you need to mention, you are talking about a process involving energy against a concentration gradient, or from an area of low concentration to high concentration. Any questions at all? Email me, but I hope that that's given you a good feeling for diffusion, passive, osmosis, osmosis, passive, active transport, active!